In this course, we talk all about Veeam backup and replication. But if you're looking to check out other third-party backup solutions as well as built-in ones, then check out my course, Sysadmin Backup and Recovery. I go over multiple different third-party applications, including Veeam, but also other products like Backup Exec, Commvault, and ArcServe. ArcServe, by the way, was the application that was being used by Enron when I did the restoration for the U.S. Justice Department, just to give you an example of a third-party application. But now I'm going to talk about the different types of backup. I want to start with full server backups. And that's the most basic type of backup, right? When you go in and backup a server the first time, it's going to be a full backup. And that means that all the data is going to be backed up. Now, in a Windows server, this can include the system state as well as the registry. And on a Windows server backup, it can include those volume shadow copies. Now, there's two different ways to turn on volume shadow. One way is going to be within the application itself. You can turn on volume shadow copies to basically make sure that you back up using the Microsoft version of shadow copies, or you can use the third-party application volume shadow that uses its own way of making copies of open files. Microsoft even has a special server role that allows you to install shadow copies for these third-party applications. And it allows copies of open files to get backed up. So if you didn't have volume shadow, then you wouldn't be able to back up open files because they are in use. And of course, a lot of files are being used, even if the users themselves don't have them open. You have the operating system that's using a lot of files within the Windows folder, for example. Now, after that backup gets done, it does what's called a reset of the archive bit. There's a little hidden bit that you can see if you type the attrib command from a command prompt or PowerShell, and it will tell you whether or not a file has been backed up. And if it's been backed up, then the backup program will reset that archive bit. So that way, if you're going to do an incremental or a differential job afterwards, it will take a look at that archive bit to see whether or not it needs to back up. The next type of backup, which Veeam does, is called an incremental backup. So full backups get all the data. All the data that's on your server is going to be backed up in a full backup. But an incremental is only going to get data that has changed. So for instance, if a file has changed from yesterday to today, then that archive bit shows back up again that says, I need to be backed up again. Incremental will run that backup of that file that's been changed, and then it will turn the archive bit off until that file gets changed again. So that way it doesn't get backed up every night. Just like most things in life, there are advantages and disadvantages to the incremental backup. One of the advantages is that it's a faster backup, and that's because it's just backing up what has changed since the day before, rather than backing up any data that's changed since the last full backup. So by the time you get to Thursday or Friday, say if a full backup happened on Sunday, then your backup is still fairly small and quick. It uses less space and it costs less because of the fact it uses less space and uses less storage. One of the disadvantages are that the incremental backups all must be good. So for instance, if you had a file that changed from Tuesday to Wednesday, but that backup goes bad and you need to restore everything on Friday, and that's the only copy of that file since it's changed, then you may have a problem. And it may be difficult to find all the backups to do a restore. So unless you're doing a synthetic backup, which does all that merging for you, if you do individual incremental backups, and for some reason you misplace one of the backups, if you're using, say, individual USB drives, then you might have a problem finding all the backups you need to do a restore using your full and incremental backups. Differential backups are a little bit different than incremental. So we start out with the full backup, which gets all of your data. But the differential gets data that has changed, but not since the day before. Differential gets data that has changed since the last full backup. It's not offered in Veeam, but it is offered in many third-party products. And once again, we have advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages would be that you only need the last differential and full backup to do a full restoration. So for instance, on Friday, if you need to do that full restore from your Sunday backup and any files that have changed, you only need Sunday and Thursday night's backup. That's it. You don't need any other backups because differential backs up all the files since the last full backup. It's easy to locate the backups and do the restore. Now, the disadvantage is it's going to use more space. On Tuesday, after, say, a full backup on Sunday, you're not going to have a lot of files that have changed since Sunday. However, by Friday, you're going to have a lot of files that have changed. And that differential backup gets bigger every day, unlike the incremental backup, which backs up files just since the day before. So it's going to be slower to back up later in the week than it would be at the beginning of the week. When we do a backup of a virtual machine, we're going to be doing what's called an image-based backup. And it's mainly used on virtual machines, but it can be used on all different types of virtual machines. The two most popular types are going to be VMware and Hyper-V. As a matter of fact, Veeam was created to back up VMware virtual machines. And then it slowly added other products such as Hyper-V and other virtual machines and individual operating systems as well. So if you have a VMware configuration where you have a lot of different VMware virtual machines on your network, then Veeam was designed just for that. You create single backup images. And those single backup images can be moved from one location to another. You can easily restore an entire virtual machine. You can just move it from your backup location right into Hyper-V or VMware and just start it right up. So if you're going to be backing up physical machines, it's going to be done in a more traditional way. There are many other types of backups, such as daily, copy, deduplication, volume shadow. These are going to be the most popular types of backups that we talked about here that you're going to find in most organizations. We will be covering a lot of these other types of backups, such as deduplication and volume shadow, in upcoming videos.